So let's carry on with the Q&A session. We're going to finish off the questions from yesterday before we move on to today's questions. And we will see what happens. This is life in a nutshell. See what happens is all uncertain. So let's carry on. So here we go. Dear Ajahn, how do we cultivate and develop our metta? And how do we keep the metta going beyond the meditation cushion? And then there's a little heart and a huge thanks. This is kind of metta in action right there. So how do we cultivate and develop our metta? Metta, essentially, well, first of all, we have to overcome the ill will. This is kind of the first step. And I'm going to talk more about this later on. We're going to have a look at one of the suttas and talk about this in detail, overcoming ill will. And then we're going to look at a little bit more detail on the, which sutta is it again? I think it is the 𝐁𝐫𝐚𝐡𝐦𝐵𝑢𝑑𝑑𝑐𝐻𝑖𝑡 Sutta, actually, the simile of the soul. I think that's what's in there. Can't remember now which suttas I've chosen, but I think it's that one. This will talk about this in quite a bit of detail. But the cultivation of metta really begins with how we treat people around us, right? The Buddha says, this is found in the Kosambiya Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 48, if you want to read the suttas. And it says in there that, first of all, we have metta by body, then metta by speech, and then metta by thought. Yeah, so we start off by bodily actions of kindness. And it's really just treating people with kindness by body. Yeah, whatever we do, a bit of generosity, a bit of, showing our appreciation, a bit of kindness for how we treat others. I am treated with enormous amount of kindness. They come about tea and with honey and things, just come to me. Yeah, so I am the recipient of a lot of metta. So thank you very much. Yeah, so this is really how it works. It's as simple as this. And it's nice to be the recipient, and it's nice to be the donor. It goes together. And this is often where we have to start. We have to start with the simple things. If you try to do metta and you sit down, you close your eyes, and may all beings be happy, may all beings be happy. It often doesn't work, right? It doesn't really have any power. You say these words, but actually it doesn't give rise to any powerful feelings unless you have developed metta already in daily life. So treat people with kindness. Treat them as if they are your friends. And if they're not your friends, have compassion for them because they are probably suffering. If they're not friends with you, they must be really silly because you're all such good people. So that's kind of a big mistake not to be friends with you now. Right? So this is kind of how we do it. And you have the metta by speech. You treat people with kindness. You say things to them that are as it says in the suttas, words that go to the heart. Yeah, Hadaya is the Pali word. It literally means goes to the heart. It's literally the expression in Pali. It's exactly the same expression we have in English. So you say things that are really that touch people in a way, right? That actually has an emotional impact on people. And sometimes it is surprising, simple little things that we don't think about saying, but that we can say. Appreciation of a co-worker, appreciation of someone in the Buddhist fellowship. Just tell someone, thank you for your friendship or something like that, something really simple, right? And say it in a way that you mean these things. And sometimes people, they are taken by surprise because they're not used to hearing these kind of things. People are not very good with using speech in a generous way to show their appreciation. It's a very powerful thing to do that. And then you create harmony with speech, and all of this has to do with metta, because you are friendly. You're treating people with friendliness. That's what it comes down to. And then you start to think of people in that way as well. And so the idea of thinking of people with metta is to remember their good qualities. Wow, isn't it wonderful that all these members of the BF, this person has such good qualities, this person has such good qualities. Wow, how fortunate I am. Okay, they may have some bad qualities, but focus on the good ones, because that is already surprising enough that we have so many good qualities. You focus on that, and then you kind of feel uplifted and you feel happy for seeing all these good qualities. And just think it for yourself. You learn to see and focus on the goodness around you, because there is a lot of goodness in places like the Buddhist fellowship, or even in people in general in society. Yeah. And then when that starts to work and you start to be able to think about people in this way, that is when metta meditation starts to happen. Yeah. Then you sit down and you think, may everyone in this room be happy and well. Yeah. May the people wherever be happy and well. And you can start to feel feelings inside because you have developed your character and your mind in the right way beforehand. So this is how to develop metta in general. Yeah. Start with the most obvious things and then gradually build up in this way. Yeah. All right. And now I'm going to enjoy the metta from other people. I don't know, it always tastes more, it tastes nicer when someone has done something kind for you, right? And you kind of taste it and you kind of, it's almost like you can taste the kindness together with the taste of the drink, whatever it is. It's strange how that is. When someone is kind to you, it's better. It's like when you in Bodhidharma monastery and people come every day and they offer food to us. The food is always nice. Yeah. Doesn't matter. Maybe you never liked it before, but now it tastes really nice because someone actually went to all that trouble to make it for you, whatever. It's kind of really interesting how that works. Anyway, we've got to move on because otherwise we're going to be here for a long time. So next one. So still working on yesterday's questions. Dear Ajahn, after practicing for many years, actually so many years, I very well understand the importance of living well, but sometimes powerless to do the right thing because of conditioning circumstances, sickness, depression, etc. This causes further depression as one realizes that one is doing unwholesome deeds and spiraling downwards and yet can't stop it. Please advise Ajahn, please advise. Much gratitude. So the answer is very simple, and this answer is what we have been talking about quite a bit already. Remember that you are a victim of your conditioning. Yeah, it is not really, you are indeed powerless many times. Yeah, you are a victim of that conditioning. And this is the idea of non-self in Buddhism, that basically we are victims of the world around us. So of course you're going to do bad things. Of course you're going to make mistakes. Have compassion for yourself when you make a mistake, because that right there, you are a sense. You want to do the right thing, but you can't help it to do sometimes what is not quite right. So have compassion for yourself. You're trying it. You have good intentions. And yet sometimes it is really hard. So the right attitude is always to have, if you have compassion for yourself, you will have compassion for others. If you have compassion for others, you will have compassion for yourself. Because human beings are just human beings, and it's impossible to kind of separate yourself out and treat yourself differently from everyone else. Sometimes people ask, how can I have metta towards myself? Well, one of the ways is to have metta towards others, because it's just metta towards human beings. And because you're a human being, you get kind of included if you have metta towards other people as well. So be forgiving for yourself. Yeah, don't think that, don't overestimate the responsibility that you have, because actually it is very difficult. All right, I'm going to leave it at that because I have spoken about that quite a bit before now. Dear Ajahn, how to develop right view besides reading the Buddha's words? I read suttas and listen to Dhamma so often, and I have been doing so for so many years, but that is obviously not enough. Haven't experienced jhanas to enable me to penetrate the truth viscerally. Then how to progress? Many thanks. Yeah, so listen to the Dhamma, look at your practice. What can you do better? What are your weaknesses? Yeah, and understanding what your weaknesses are is where you can change. So we have to be honest with ourselves. Sometimes we have to be brutally honest. We have weaknesses that we may not want to see, but if you don't want to see them, all you're doing is blocking your own progress. Sometimes a bit of brutal honesty is required. But in my experience, you're all really good people. Yeah, maybe just sometimes need to appreciate yourself a little bit more now, because already people here are doing really well. I've been coming to the Buddhist Fellowship. How long now? How long have you been coming to the Buddhist Fellowship, Eileen? 20 years, something? Yeah, something like that. It's a long time. And some of you I have known for pretty much almost 20 years, and some of you not. But you're doing really well. Sometimes a bit more self-appreciation, right? And then trying, what are my weaknesses? How do I think about other people? Can I improve my thinking? I'm going to talk more about this later on, because the idea of thinking in the right way is incredibly important. If you think in the right way, your actions and the speech, they follow along as a matter of course, because your mind is already in the right place. And it is not that difficult to learn how to think in the right way. Surprisingly, yeah, you may think it's really hard, but actually, no, it can be done. So this is maybe what you have to do, right? Be really honest with yourself. Yes, you're reading the suttas, understanding the Dhamma, and then you have to really put it into practice. Yesterday you mentioned that there is no future, and instead of focusing on the five sense world, we should focus on building up good qualities within us. Could you kindly share how to cultivate good qualities through meditation, since we shouldn't think when we meditate, instead observe our thoughts? Thank you. So meditation is about creating a peaceful mind. Yeah, this is kind of the main aspect of meditation, if you like. And this is what the idea of mindfulness of breathing is like. And very often that is the result of good qualities. Yeah, it is itself a good quality, but it is a result of all the good qualities that we develop during the daily life, during our daily activities. So a lot of building up of good qualities happens during daily life. Yeah. Because there are challenges, you are actually sometimes forced to change your habits, do things differently. It is those challenges, it is then that you have the opportunity to change your outlook and do things differently, to change your habits. When it is difficult, that is also when there is an opportunity. So meditation is almost like enjoying the results of building up good qualities during daily life. Yeah, then you sit down, you just relax, and you allow the process to happen. And when that process happens, that will often reinforce the good qualities, because being peaceful will make you see more clearly where you're going wrong, what is happening in your life that you should change. It will also give you more energy, give you more ability to you have more resilience in daily life and all of these kind of things. So the two kind of support each other here. But most of the time, it is building up good qualities in daily life. Of course, you can do things like metta meditation, yeah, especially after doing all of these things I mentioned before, and then the metta meditation may work. And if you get some powerful states of metta, then you are going to be then of course you are building up good qualities in the meditation itself. Yeah. Okay. So if it not satisfy what I say, then try again tomorrow or whatever. See what happens. Dear Ajahn Brahmali, question number 1. How is it that sometimes, and you think there's only 100 questions, but actually there's more than 100, because you have how is it that sometimes in the suttas we see people getting enlightened after hearing the teaching from the Buddha? How could it be so instant? So it is usually not instant. Yeah, this is instant enlightenment is like a myth, like it doesn't really actually happen. So very often when you see this in the suttas, it is more like, it's not really a sutta so much as like a narrative. It's like a story that you usually are told in the suttas. The story goes something like this. The Buddha is walking along, a person comes up to the Buddha, they bow down to the Buddha teaches the Four Noble Truths, and bang, they become a stream actor. But it's actually not the Buddha talking, it's a story. So you have to distinguish between two things in the sutras. One is the teaching of the Buddha, the other one is the stories. The stories have to be taken with a grain of salt. The teachings of the Buddha, that is the main teaching. And so very often when you hear these stories, it's like you don't really get the full picture of what is going on. We don't get all the background. It's like a highlight is given. They become a stream actor. The reality is often going to be much more complex. And so you can take it that what you should focus on is the teaching of the Buddha, the Noble Eightfold Path, and not on these special cases when people become enlightened very quickly. This is kind of the point here. Sometimes people do become enlightened when they hear a teaching, but to understand this correctly, again, you have to read how this happens according to the sutras. And the way that this happens, and the Buddha says there's 5 called the Panch Vimukta, the 5 spheres of liberation, if you like. These are different ways when the Dhamma makes you liberate. In other words, you become a stream actor or enlightened or whatever. And one of them is by listening to the Dhamma. So you listen to the Dhamma, and as you listen to the Dhamma, joy arises. Because you're hearing something really beautiful and profound, something really that goes straight to your heart. The joy arises. From that joy comes the rapture. From the rapture comes the tranquility. From the tranquility comes the happiness. From the happiness comes the samadhi. So samadhi is there, and it is always goes via samadhi. And when you have the samadhi, that is when you can see things according to reality. That's when you have the yata buddha nadadasana, seeing things according to reality. So it is never just listening to the Dhamma and then becoming enlightened. It always goes through this process via samadhi, then seeing things in the right way. And so that is when you listen to the Dhamma, or it is you reflect on the Dhamma. You heard something and then you reflect on it afterwards and you go through this process. Or it is that you teach the Dhamma. Sometimes teaching the Dhamma can lead to a similar kind of process. And it's very fascinating. You hear Ajahn Brahmali talk about this. Ajahn Brahmali often says that as he is teaching the Dhamma, he gets these kind of really powerful stillness coming up. And if he doesn't stop himself, he will just disappear into samadhi. And then the teaching stops, right? And then you have to wait for him to come out of samadhi before he can carry on. So he stops himself before he goes into samadhi. Otherwise, we have to wait a few hours. So this is all of these ways of then achieving samadhi. It always goes via samadhi. There's no such thing as just listening to the Dhamma and then becoming enlightened as a consequence. Oops, question number 2 I forgot. Okay. Okay. When we search for the past Buddha, why are there birthplaces all around India and Nepal? They existed eons before the current Buddha, and India and Nepal has not existed that long. Thank you, Ajahn. This is an interesting point. According to the sutras, the Buddhas are always born in Jambudvipa. Jambudvipa is the word in the sutras for India. Jambudvipa literally means the rose apple land. This kind of the land where the rose apple grows, and that is India. So how come that Buddhas always get reborn in India? Does that make any sense? And this is how I understand this, right? It takes certain conditions for a Buddha to arise. If those conditions are not there, it's impossible for a Buddha to arise, or very difficult or very unlikely. What are those conditions? Well, it is like we need a country which has many of the characteristics that we found in ancient India. It has a culture of ascetics that live in the forest and practice meditation. It has a culture that supports those kind of ascetics, so you can live that kind of life. It has a a culture which practices samadhi already, deep states of meditation, as it was in ancient India. So you have all of these conditions coming together so that the gap from that culture to enlightenment is as small as possible. If the gap is too large, it's impossible, right? Imagine being a Buddha in Singapore. It's not easy, right? It's difficult, or in Perth or whatever. Yeah, you have to kind of go between all the skyscrapers, and the kind of it's not the same. So concrete jungle and real jungle, not the same thing. Yeah. And so you need those conditions. And the way I understand the idea of Jambudvipa is that it is that country which has those conditions. Yeah, that is the name of that country is called Jambudvipa. That country is called India. And that is why the Buddha always arrives in India, because those conditions are required. What do you think? Does that kind of make sense? Maybe. It is, I don't know how to understand it. Something like that, I think, must be the way to understand this, because otherwise it's weird, right? Because India obviously exists now in a different eon. Presumably everything is different. The continents have moved, everything is different. There is a different planet or whatever. So it doesn't really make any sense to think of physical India in the same way. Anyway, that is my suggestion for an answer to these things. Dear Ajahn, do you think we can say the opposite of papancha is sunyata? Many things proliferate in our exterior world and also in our minds, but we can have a cosmic video recorder focused on this point in space where we exist, and we rewind the tape by 13.8 billion years. There is nothing but emptiness. We could fast forward by 100 years and we will just be seeing rubble and heaps of the four elements rather than this hall and the people and the minds in it. Is the opposite of papancha, is it sunyata? I think that is a nice way of thinking about it. Yeah, it is not the full sunyata, because the full sunyata is the emptiness from the sense of self. You can have a preliminary ending of papancha. Papancha is the proliferation of the thought, the mind is going on and on and on. Of course, if you go into samadhi, the papancha will stop temporarily. So that is a kind of temporary stopping, but it's not really the full sunyata. The full sunyata is the ending of the sense of self, when it goes all the way. So it's a bit more profound, but you are onto something. If you guys have a look at the Chula Sunyata Sutta found in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length sayings of the Buddha, number 121, the shorter sutta on emptiness, it talks about emptiness a little bit like you are talking about it here. And it starts off by saying that if you go to the forest and you sit down at the root of the tree, then your perception is empty of elephants and horses and noises of the city, right? It's like here, we come out of Singapore, it is empty of the perception of Singapore and empty of the perception of Perth, for that matter, because we are in Batam Island. Batam Island, no Singapore, no Perth. And it's a bit more peaceful and quiet. And then you have just the perception of forest. It's empty of the perception of all the noise. And then you use like a meditation object. I think in this case, it is the earth kasina meditation object. And then when you focus on that, then it is empty of the perception of forest. That disappears. Then you go into a profound state of samadhi, and then the perception of the earth kasina disappears. One thing disappears after another, become more and more empty. And in this way, what you're saying here is also kind of relevant to that. So I think that is a nice way of thinking about it. Now, the rest of your question here is kind of interesting. Proliferate in our exterior world, in our minds, but we can. But if we can have a cosmic video recorder focused on this point in space where we exist, and we rewind by 13.8 billion years, there is nothing but emptiness. Are you sure? I don't think so. I don't think it is, right? Because remember that you are being reborn. So you are going to be somewhere. And wherever you are, your papancha will also be there. Yeah, because you were not enlightened before. So your mind will still have papancha in it. So I don't know where you were 13.8 billion years ago, but maybe you were in a different universe. Or maybe the universe existed and it kind of contracted and expanded or something like that. We just don't know what happened 13.8 billion years ago, but probably you were somewhere, and right wherever you were, probably you had some papancha. So I would say nothing but emptiness, probably not. Yeah, a previous universe more likely. Yeah. And if we go forward by 100 years, we will just see rubble and heaps of the four elements rather than this whole. Yeah, quite likely this whole will just be rubble in 100 years' time, quite possibly. And that's kind of interesting, but that's not really emptiness either, right? Rubble is not the same as emptiness. So people will be somewhere else, and wherever they are, they will have a punch. That is the nature of being usually. All right, wow, so many questions. Okay, which meditation method is good in finding detachment in grief? Grief from losing family members. Okay, so usually to deal with grief, meditation can be useful, yeah, but often it also has to do with how we think about things. And by reflecting on things in the right way, sometimes that is more helpful to let go of grief rather than actually meditation. Meditation can be an additional tool, but thinking in the right way actually is more powerful. So how can we think so that we can lose the sense of grief? And one way of doing this is to remember that if you grieve for somebody, usually that means they were good people. Otherwise, you wouldn't grieve so much if they were dodgy characters. So probably they were good people. And if someone was a good person, it means that wherever they have gone afterwards, it will be a good place. Yeah, so you can think of them. Maybe now, maybe they're sitting in a heavenly realm somewhere, and they're looking down at you and they're saying, "Don't grieve. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm just having a good time up here. Yeah, I'm just waiting for you to arrive." So, yeah, so just practice well, live well, and then before you know it, you will also be joining me up here. What are you crying for? No point in crying. Yeah, it's all right. And that actually is what they say in the suttas. They say if you want to be together in the future life, you have to have similar spiritual qualities, similar generosity, similar sila, similar learning, similar wisdom. One more, I can't remember the last one. Something like that, yeah? And so that is what you have to do. So if this person that you were attached to was a good person, practice in the same way, yeah? And then you're on the right track. And when you think about it like that, it doesn't seem so terrible anymore. It's more like having a holiday apart. And we all know that absence makes the heart grow fonder. So even better, right? It's better that they died because the heart grows fonder. If they hadn't died, it wouldn't grow fonder. Wait, maybe dying is good. So you can see how this is all tied to perception, right? I apologize, I don't mean to diminish your grief or to kind of make fun of it. But my point is just that it is all based on perception. And if you perceive things in one way, you grieve, perceive it another way, actually, you think, wow, well done for dying in heaven. Yeah, you're going to heaven, you have practiced well, you lived well. Thank you for being my, I don't know, what relationship this person has to you, father, mother, husband, wife, whatever it is. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for sharing your good qualities. Thank you for helping to make us have a good life together. Yeah, wow, I wish you well in heaven. See you soon. Yeah, something like that. And then kind of that, the reason we grieve is because of the sense of loss. But usually that sense of loss is only temporary. Once you see it like that, it changes the equation. So try to change your perceptions a little bit, yeah. And as you do that, and you use this instead as an encouragement to practice well and to live well, so that maybe you meet again in the future, you're using it in a positive sense to improve your own life and also improve the life of the other people around you. It's a beautiful thing that, a beautiful story that I tell usually when I do funeral services. One of the things we do as monks, we do funeral services. We do not do wedding services. Because funerals are considered better than weddings from a monastic point of view. Yeah. Funerals are an opportunity to let go and kind of move on in a good way. Weddings we don't recommend as Buddhist monks. But so this story that I always tell when we do funeral services, or I do funeral services, is a story from Ajahn Chah, who was Ajahn Brahm's teacher. Yeah, so this story is a story of Ajahn Chah. He has a glass. I haven't got a glass, but I got this one. So pretend this is a glass. So he takes a glass in his hand and holds it up. And usually there would be large assemblies of people when he would give a teaching. Yeah, often maybe thousands of people who would come from around the world to hear him teach because he was such a famous meditation master. And so he would hold up the glass and he would say, "Can you see the crack in the glass?" No. Can't see the crack in the glass? Can you see the crack in the glass? No. And he would say, well, even though you cannot see the crack in the glass, the crack is already there. And the reason why the crack is already there is that the glass is a very fragile thing. One day you will drop that glass, because this is the nature of glasses, that eventually you drop them. And when you drop, it will shatter into 1,000 pieces. That fragility, that crack, is a metaphor for the fragility of the glass. The crack is already there. We know it's vulnerable. We know it's fragile. Eventually, it will have to go into 1,000 pieces when you drop it on the concrete floor or whatever. Human life is like a glass. The crack is already there. We are all fragile. We are all very vulnerable. I was just talking to Dr. Andrew just before, and was saying it's a miracle how this body doesn't go wrong all the time. Yeah, I don't know much about anatomy. I know a little bit, and all I know is that there's blood vessels everywhere, there's nerve endings everywhere, there's lymph system, there's all incredibly complicated. It's a miracle we even live for a single day. That's what I reckon. Yeah, and so we are so fragile. Things go wrong so easily. You get the car running into you, you fall down, something happens, yeah, and then bang, it's over. And because it is so fragile, what do we do with the glass? We care for it. You put it down gently. You don't kind of drop it down. You put it down gently. You look after it so it can last as long as possible. In the same way, because human beings are fragile, because each one of us can break a leg or whatever at any time, or die at any time. We look after each other. We care for each other. This is a beautiful way of thinking about human life, yeah? And when someone dies, and you remind yourself of these things, human life is fragile. We should learn to care for each other. Now is the opportunity to care. If we don't take it now, we may never actually get to do it at any point. So this is a beautiful way of thinking about life and death, and how to kind of make the Dhamma come out of an experience that often is very difficult. Is it possible to close the door maybe over there? There's so much music coming through now. Thank you. All right. So, next question. Dear Ajahn, when there is a lot of pain in the body, what would you advise? Thank you so much, Kim. What would you advise to address it during meditation? The best way to address the pain is to shift your posture. Yeah, if you can, I would not recommend you to sit in a particular posture all the time simply because you should sit in a posture. Change your posture. Yeah, this is the best way. Find a posture that is as comfortable as you can, so you can sit as long as possible, and then when it gets difficult, change the posture and then carry on. This is if the pain is not chronic pain. If it's chronic pain, it's more difficult. But with ordinary pain, which I assume you're talking about, that is the best way. wow, this is really neat handwriting. Some people have amazing handwriting. That's really nice. Yeah. Have you seen Ajahn Brahm's handwriting? Yeah. Ajahn Brahm's handwriting is the most extraordinary handwriting you can ever see. Yeah. He wrote a book. You remember the Opening the Door of Your Heart? That was one of Ajahn Brahm's early books. And he wrote that by hand. And eventually, I think it was auctioned here in Singapore. I think it was auctioned. Remember 𝐈𝐴𝐿𝐴𝐿? No, 𝐈𝐴𝐿𝐴𝐿 is busy now. Okay. So, remember that book, 𝐈𝐴𝐿𝐴𝐿, was auctioned, Ajahn Brahm's Opening the Door of Your Heart, the handwritten document. That was here in Singapore, wasn't it? I think, or something like that. Maybe it was in Perth. Anyway, okay. So it was auctioned off because, and the reason why it was auctioned off, because it is this extraordinary kind of piece of handwriting. Yeah. Ajahn Brahm wrote it by hand. It was during his retreat, his 6-month retreat. Towards the end, he wrote this book. And when you look at that, it's more beautiful than a page in a book, right? It is, the characters are just as consistent as reading a printed book. Every character looks exactly the same. Every A looks exactly like every other A. And it's written on lines that are completely straight. Page after page, no change, exactly the same style all the way through. It's kind of really extraordinary here. And when you see that, you realize that this is a result of samadhi. It's a result of a mind that is incredibly consistent and able to write like this. When I see this thing, it's really like, it's almost spooky that anyone can write like that. My handwriting is terrible, and that's why I am so kind of in awe when I see this kind of thing. Anyway, and I'm getting really, this is not what this question is about at all. But anyway. Dear Ajahn, as you explained that we should react with compassion to the person who are treating us unkindly. What about people who do not rejoice in the goodness of other people's achievements and are jealous? They are outshined in small matters too. Thank you. Yeah, well, people who are jealous, they also are worthy of compassion. Yeah, jealousy is a very painful state. It is not nice at all. And the right thing, as you precisely say, is to rejoice if someone else is successful. And jealousy is a very, very painful thing. Yeah. And again, have compassion for them, because they are often trapped in that jealousy. It is a bad habit that they have built up in the past, in past lives, and now they can't really get out of it. And they can kind of, the mind is small and contracted and narrow, and they're unable to rejoice in other people's good achievements. So please, in all of these cases, when people have these bad qualities, then have compassion for them, because it is a painful state of mind to be in. All right. Dear Ajahn, what is it that the idea of doing good to have a better future does not contradict with the doctrine of non-self? Thank you. Because the idea here is the idea of the stream of consciousness, right? This idea of the stream of consciousness is that there is individuality, but not a self. Yeah, so there is, for example, my stream of consciousness is separate from your stream of consciousness, right? There's no kind of crossover. And so there is individuality in that sense. And every individual stream of consciousness, there is a connection between action and result. So within my stream of consciousness, if I say bad things to you, I will have to bear the results of that saying those bad things. Yeah, so that's within one stream of consciousness, there is a relationship between intention and how you feel about yourself. And this is the idea of karma and result of karma. And this is irrespective of whether there's a self or not. You don't need a self for this to happen. This is just a natural law of the world, how the world works. And you know that if you do good, you feel good about yourself, right? And it's obvious. We all know this. If you do bad things, you feel bad about yourself. This is just kind of really obvious if you have a little bit of insight into your own mind. And so just follow that insight. And if you think that contradicts with the idea of the self, then follow the insight rather than the theory, because the theory just gets in the way of the insight. The insight, obviously, you know this is true, that one thing leads to something else. The idea of non-self is more profound. If you don't really feel it matches up, then leave it to one side for now. What are, with the danger and pitfalls of perception and proliferation, I sometimes feel the kindest thing I can do to people around me and humanity as a whole is to recluse myself and live the life of a hermit, suggesting supporting my loved ones from afar. This way, I remove one factor of proliferation from the chaotic world of humanity and also remain kind and compassionate. Am I taking this too far? The world is going to proliferate whether you are there or not. The proliferation of individuals comes from their craving, their sense of self, their views. Yeah. Yes, you can make that worse, but you can also make it better. If you are a force for good in the world, if you have right view and you help others getting right view, that will reduce their proliferation. Yeah, if you live well and you have others reduce the sense of self, reduce the cravings in their life, you are actually supporting non-proliferation. Yeah, the Buddha did kind of become a recluse for a while, and he kind of was a hermit for a while, but then he came back into the world. And the Buddha was a source for less proliferation in the world. That is why we now have the ability and possibility of overcoming proliferation because of the Buddha. Without the Buddha, that wouldn't work. So I would say it depends. Yeah, I think your ideas here are not quite right. Yeah, I don't think you are removing proliferation by making yourself a recluse. The way you are removing proliferation is by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. That is how you're removing it. You will have an impact on yourself, and then that impact will also be felt by others afterwards. Yeah, that is the right way. So how do you practice the Noble Eightfold Path? Well, that depends. One way of doing it is by becoming a recluse. Yes, that is one way of doing it. But you don't necessarily have to. You can live in a monastery, you can live as a hermit, you can even live in society and practice the Noble Eightfold Path to a reasonable extent. Yeah, so that depends on your situation, how you do that. So that, I think, is the right way of thinking. Dear Ajahn, the Buddha said establishing the mindfulness first before observing the breath. How do we establish mindfulness? Isn't it the whole point of meditation to establish mindfulness? I'm told to gently bring back the mind to the breath when I have wandering thoughts. Is that in line with the Buddha's teachings? Thank you very much for answering my question, Ajahn. Oh, PS on the back here. I'm afraid I might not even pass the first step of following the sequence given by the Buddha, or rather, what level of mindfulness is required? How long does it need to sustain before we start watching our breath? So basically, the idea here is that we want the watching of the breath to be easy. We don't want to have to force the mind too much. We don't want to use too much willpower. It specifically says in the Sutta that meditation should happen without willpower. It should be a natural process. Now, the only way you can be able to enable that to be a natural process is to have a degree of mindfulness before you watch the breath. This is why we have 6 factors on the Noble Eightfold Path before you get to Satipatthana or right mindfulness, right? So you have already a fairly good conduct. You don't have too many bad thoughts. This is what right effort is about. And then the meditation starts to work. So very often you just need to sit back and just kind of, this is all of these things about learning to let go, being the passenger, enjoying sitting here, enjoying the peace and quiet. The breath is often there because the breath is kind of present anyway, but you don't focus on it straight away. You would leave it to one side, And then you just allow things to calm down and become peaceful because you enjoy peace in a general sense. If you go to the breath too quickly, what you will find is that you have to grasp the breath. And by grasping the breath becomes unpleasant. And then the meditation is not really nice anymore. So you want to have as much mindfulness as you can before you go to the breath. So, and then you ask, isn't it the case that mindfulness comes about by watching the breath? Actually, not really. Yeah, this is what the Buddha says, establish mindfulness first, then watch the breath. Yeah, because if you try to establish mindfulness through watching the breath, again, it takes too much grasping, it's too painful and too difficult. But it's not, these things are a little bit kind of, it's not kind of one right way of doing this. Someone was saying the other day that they like to watch the breath from the beginning and they get good results from that. Yeah, and that's good. If that works for you and you get good results, then please do that and watch the breath from the beginning. But if you find that that makes you tense and it's not really enjoyable, then take a step back and relax first of all. Allow the mind to become peaceful first of all. Yeah. Think about something positive. Think about the 𝐁𝐫𝐚𝐡𝐧. Bring about a positive mind state. The things that we should do first of all is having a positive mind state, allowing the general feelings of the world to fade into the background, using a little bit of contemplation to let go of the future and the past. Yeah, future is not really all that interesting. Why do we think so much about the future? Forgiving the past, all of these kind of things, so that the mind becomes reasonably mindful. Then we watch the breath. Yeah. So this is a kind of the ideal way, but again, it will vary from individual to individual. So do what works for you. Don't become too trapped in ideas and kind of the the perfect way of doing things. And then hopefully you find a way through this. Bring the mind back to the breath, yeah, which is like an anchor when you have wandering thoughts. Yes, but don't bring the mind back, because the idea of bringing the mind back is like using willpower. Instead, wait for the breath to come back to you. Yeah, it's almost the same thing, but not exactly the same thing. The difference is that in one place you don't use any willpower because you just wait for the breath. The other one, you go out and grab hold of the breath. This is just a skillful way of avoiding using too much willpower. So wait for the breath to come back. And then when the breath comes back to you, you are doing mindfulness of breathing again. Yeah, it's a way of making the whole situation more relaxing. This is the idea. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Oh, time is going fast. So here we have the next question. What's the Buddha's view on freeganism? Freeganism is the practice of taking food and other items that other people, shops, or organizations have thrown away. Aha, so they are not wasted. What is the Buddha's view on freeganism? Gee, but I never heard this word before. Okay, let's learn something new. So thank you for that. Freeganism. What is the Buddha's view? The Buddha gave a very clear teaching on freeganism. No, he didn't. I don't think this word exists in the sutras. But basically, monks are almost a bit like freeganists. Yeah, is that the word, freeganist? I guess freeganist must be a word. And if you freeganize, is that the verb? So I think it's a really nice idea. Yeah, to me, it sounds like a really, really good idea. And yes, there is so much waste in our society. Food waste is a really, really big problem in our societies. And it is something that we need to sort it out. I think in the US, they call it dumpster diving. Yeah, dumpster diving is like dumpsters are this kind of big, what do they call them in Australia? They call them Republic of Australia again, that's a different name in Australia. Dumpster in Australia, it is not wheelie bin, this large containers almost like things. Yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. Whatever. So the food, so dumpster, that means you go into these large containers and you kind of take out the food and you live on that. Yeah, this is many people do that. And that's kind of cool. Yeah, if you're a monk, you can do that. So if I go to the US and no one wants to feed me, I go dumpster diving here. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Kind of dive into these dumpsters, and I'm sure you find that the food is usually really good quality, has been thrown out of supermarkets. Okay, the kind of it's out of date, but these dates mean nothing, right? It's kind of completely irrelevant. You can still eat the food for weeks afterwards, and it's perfectly all right. And so that's the kind of it's kind of nice. And as a monk, you can do that because that food has been given up. It has been thrown out. It is pangsukula food, food on the dust heap, and you're allowed to take things that have been thrown away as a monk. So great, I think it's wonderful. It is almost like you're becoming a little bit like a monk when you live like that, yeah? So please be a freeganist. I think the Buddha probably would approve of that, actually. So that's really, sounds cool. So thank you for teaching me a new word. It's great. All right. Next one. How would the Buddha deal with someone with high narcissism? Is this mentioned in any sutta? So the Buddha would probably just say that narcissism is a defilement of the mind. And he would, these days, we tend to think of narcissism as being a very ingrained quality in people that cannot be changed. I think that's not true at all. Every quality of a human being can be changed, including narcissism. It just depends on whether the narcissist understands that they have a problem and they're actually trying to change it. By being kind, by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, the narcissistic qualities will eventually wear away, and they will actually disappear. And so I think that we should never think of psychological traits as being permanent or being, this is just a modern idea, and it comes, I think, from the idea of a sense of self. We tend to think of these things as far more stuck than they actually are, when in reality there is the possibility of change. So, but how do we deal with someone like that? It doesn't really say anything in the suttas, because it's not really talking about those things, but you deal with, like you deal with everyone, you have compassion for them because these are people who actually have a lot of suffering. The reason why people become narcissists is because they are missing something inside, they're missing some kind of feeling good about themselves, so they kind of externalize it somehow onto society, and it has bad effects as a consequence. So anyone with some kind of mental disorder like this, there is some suffering going on under the surface. They may not realize that, they may not understand it, because narcissism kind of blinds you to these things, but still it is there. So have compassion for them, And sometimes it can be very difficult to be in the presence of narcissistic people, because they can be very ruthless, they can be abusive, there can be all of these kind of issues with them. So sometimes you may have to withdraw from their company, and maybe not really be around them. And this is kind of the issue with many people around us. We should always be compassionate, but compassion does not always need to be interaction with those people. If people are really difficult, really abusive, sometimes we have to withdraw. And so this is often the right way. So be compassionate and withdraw at the same time. Compassion is often a mental state and not always a way of acting towards others. Living a lay life, there is aspiration to grow in career, more from growth than financial fame perspective. Thinking about the struggle, striving, competition to get forward, there is a separate thought that it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, material intellectual gain growth isn't as valuable as spiritual growth. how can I reconcile these two thoughts, aspiration to take action or not? Thank you. Yes, to grow in a career, I can understand what you mean. Yeah, because if to a career to be interesting, you want to learn, you want to do your best, and you want to grow somehow, I can see why you would want to do that, and it makes sense. And so the way to combine it is just to remember that if you are going to grow in your career, do it through living, for doing it in the right way. Yeah, always bring spiritual qualities to everything. Yeah? Bring kindness to it, bring goodness to it, bring compassion, all of these qualities to that career. I think you're more likely to grow faster in the career if you bring those qualities to it. I don't know, I know some people who are really good people, and they also have really, really good careers. Yeah, and I think often the two things go together. I don't think there has to be any separation there. So, but if you need to make a choice, always make the choice to go with the spiritual qualities. Always, that should be number one priority. Yeah, not the growth of the career. But usually they can go together. Okay, dear Ajahn Brahmali, you mentioned live well several times during your sharings. Can you share the definition of live well? Be kind. I just keep it short because I have so many questions, but basically it means being kind, yeah? Being compassionate, being understanding, live morally. Dear Ajahn Brahmali, what is the purpose of life? If the purpose of life is to seek enlightenment, isn't this too high level and difficult for the ordinary people like us? So the purpose of life is, if you look into your heart and you ask yourself what you want, yeah, we are all driven by these desires. What is that desire? What does it come down to? Well, what that desire comes down to is the satisfaction of that desire. The satisfaction of a desire means contentment. Yeah? So really everything that drives us in life, everything that makes you move in the morning when you get out of the bed, everything that makes you make choices, like what you're going to have for breakfast, what kind of job you go to, what religion you choose, and all the choices in our life are driven by the search for some meaning, some purpose or whatever, yeah? We are kind of moving, trying to find something. We're driven by desires all the time. When that desire is complete and fulfilled, then we have, by definition, found the meaning of life. So we want to complete this search, complete the find fulfillment for that craving. How do you find that? Through the spiritual path. And one day, as I was mentioning before, with the simile of the dog and the bone, I apologize if that was too depressing. Whereas 𝐷𝐞𝐽 is over there, so 𝐷𝐞𝐽 found it very depressive. But anyway, so I'm sorry about that. But if the positive side is the side of practicing samadhi, right? Where you find that completion within yourself. One day, suddenly you feel complete within, that the craving is completely gone, and you realize you have found that very thing that you were looking for all along. This was what craving was pointing towards. This is what craving actually desired, with a sense of completion inside, where you are completely content. There's nothing more to drive you anywhere. That is the meaning of life. And each step on the spiritual path is a movement towards that. So even though you may not be able to attain the full meaning of life straight away, or it may take time, or sometimes it may take many lifetimes or whatever, you can make steps in that direction. Every time you're kind to someone, every time you have a kind thought, every time you're generous, every time you're compassionate, every time you avoid the anger, every time you are less greedy, every one of those things is a step in that direction. Yeah, more contentment, more happiness, less of this drive to achieve, to go somewhere, to achieve that fulfillment or whatever it might be. Yeah, does that make sense? If it doesn't make any sense, please try again, and I shall try another angle. So now that is all the questions from yesterday. Gee, that was a lot of questions. Now, the questions from today. So we'll see which questions are better yesterday or today. So, number one, dear Ajahn, many thanks for your teaching. That's a really good start for a question. I really, especially when you are not too well. Actually, I'm quite well. This coughing, everyone has sympathy. It's great, isn't it? Everyone has sympathy for me, and actually, I feel quite good anyway. Isn't that great? I get both the sympathy and the feeling well at the same time. It doesn't get better than that. So please keep the sympathy coming. Why does the Vipassana Sutta mention 4 perceptions only, whereas Girimananda Sutta mentions 10 perceptions? Much gratitude, may you be well. So the Vipassana Sutta is specifically about the distortion of perceptions, right? It is about how our view of the world is distorted. And these are the 4 main areas that it talks about, yeah? Seeing impermanence as permanent, seeing self as seeing non-self as self, seeing suffering as happiness, seeing ugliness as beautiful, yeah? These are the 4 main areas. The Girimananda Sutta is about developing our perceptions. So it's a different kind of take, a different angle on perceptions. So then it talks about how we can develop contentment, how we can develop perception of abandoning, perception of impermanence, and these kind of things. Yeah. So one is looking at perception from the point of view of what is distorted. The other one is looking at perception from the point of view of how we can develop our minds. And these are 2 slightly different areas, and that's why one is 4 and one is 10 there. But also, there are many suttas in the 𝐭𝐴𝑛𝐺𝐢𝐻𝑖𝐻 that talks about a number of different perceptions, yeah? And sometimes they just group together. They just group together a random number. It would have depended on the audience. The Buddha gives these teachings, and he would have looked at the audience and the time and place and to give what was appropriate, right? This is often what happens. That's why there are different numbers sometimes. So it's nice to have different numbers because then you can have the numerical discourses. If you want on numbers, you can have numerical discourses. It's a nice way of grouping the suttas. Dear Ajahn Brahmali, do the 5 aggregates of clinging connect with dependent origination? Yes, they do. So you can imagine the 5 aggregates of clinging, that is in essence a way of looking at our person. Yeah, this is a way of thinking about ourselves. These 5 aggregates, these are what you experience right now. You experience the 5 aggregates, like I mentioned yesterday. You're perceiving, you are feeling, you are willing, you are aware. So you are experiencing these 5 aggregates right now. Dependent origination is about how these 5 aggregates evolve over time. That's what it is about, yeah? So, for example, dependent origination will say that when you contact the world, yeah, the I, like we said yesterday, the I, the object, the I consciousness arises, the 3 coming together is contact. Being, you have an experience. That is one way of the 5 aggregates manifest through experience. Because of that experience, there is a feeling. That's one aspect of the 5 aggregates. Because of that feeling, you start craving. Yeah? So the 5 aggregates change. Craving arises. Yeah, what is that? Well, craving is a little bit of perception. It's a little bit of will, because craving means there's a desire, there's a willing there going on, right? There's a particular feeling that goes with that craving. You can see the aggregates changing a little bit when you go from feeling to craving. Yeah? Then when you go from craving to, it was this tanha, you go to upadana. Upadana is taking up, yeah, holding on, grasping, attaching. And so then from craving, you start attaching to things. You become a Buddhist and you attach a little bit to Buddhism. Is that right? It's good to attach a little bit, yeah? Because if you don't attach a little bit, then nothing happens. Attach a little bit to your precepts, attach a little bit to kindness, attach a little bit to all of these things, because then you actually do it. If you don't attach, nothing happens. So a little bit of attachment to the right things is this ladder of attachment. Attach to the good, let go of the bad. Yeah, so that is another version of the five khandhas, yeah, where there is attachment. This is another aspect of the sankhara, of the will. The will is what holds on to things. It comes, a different perception comes with that, yeah, different kind of feeling again. So you can see dependent origination shows you the development of the five khandhas, yeah, and then you have existence. You exist in a certain way according to your attachments. Then you get reborn. This is the five khandhas, getting reborn. It is the stream of consciousness. The stream of consciousness brings the other khandhas with it. And so there is the khandhas taking a new shape in a new realm. And of course, when you get reborn, that's when there's a big shift. Yeah, during this life, the khandhas kind of change a little bit as you have different experiences. But when you get reborn, there can be a big shift in the khandhas. Suddenly, the perceptions are really different. If you get reborn as a deva, the way you perceive the world is very different from a human being. If you get reborn as a mosquito, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you do get reborn as a mosquito, you can imagine the way you see the world is going to be very different again. Please avoid getting reborn as a mosquito. It's bad. People don't care about you, right? They kind of just kill you willy-nilly. You're just there. You just want to get some blood. Yeah, please give me some blood. I need blood. And you're just going to kill me here. Don't get reborn as a mosquito. So this is how the five khandhas and dependent origination go together. One is the development of the five khandhas. The other one is just a analysis of a person. Dear Ajahn, thank you for your insights about how the nature of the world is that it will have wars and problems. This helps give me direction and consolation as someone very concerned about social justice. Okay, good, yeah. So that's I agree with you. I think we should all be concerned about social justice. I think we should all be concerned about the problems of the world. We should do our little bit. And by doing our little bit, we're showing compassion for the world. Really, that's what it is all about. Yeah, we're showing our concern and we want to help other people, while at the same time we understand that what we do is unlikely to be enough. So we don't hold on too tight, and we understand that things may still go completely wrong, even though we're doing our bit. Anyway, my question is, how should we strike the balance of being equanimous with this, how the world is, versus taking positive action? I often worry about not doing enough to help those who are suffering. Thank you. Please, as I said, please have compassion for the world. Understand that this is often one way of living morally, of supporting people in difficulties, people who are suffering because of a variety of reasons. Yeah, do what you can, but understand that regardless of what you do, it will not be enough. Yeah, you know that already. The world is going to go its own way, regardless of what you do. Politics is really unreliable. Wars are unreliable. Climate change is uncertain. You hear about all the climate change activists around the world. They want to help the world go in the right direction. And they're trying really hard, but does it work? Maybe it works a little bit, but does it work enough? Who knows? Yeah, very, very uncertain. And because it is so uncertain, we should not rely or place all our eggs in one basket, as they say here, and hope that actually is going to work out, because we may end up becoming incredibly disillusioned. Yeah, it doesn't work out. So we do live in a compassionate way, and by living in a compassionate way, you're actually doing your spiritual practice anyway. Yeah, the two things go together. So you do your spiritual practice, you help the world, these things go together. And then if the world turns out to go the wrong way, which it often does, then you have your spiritual practice to support you, to make you resilient, to take you through the problems. Growing up in conservative Singapore and being part of the LGBTQ community, I resonate very much with the experience of being othered that you shared. It's a feeling I can only openly share with people like me. Even in awesome places like many kind people like BF, who are most likely compassionate to suffering of the community, I never really know if it is safe to be my authentic self. Help, how does one perhaps use this suffering of feeling othered in society to grow in the practice and be liberated from this suffering? I just want to be a good and kind person. Thank you for advice, Ajahn. May you be well and free from 𝐁𝐫𝐚. Thank you. So, yes, I can understand that, because, this is, I think, a very common experience from anyone who is like a minority in society. A minority comes in so many different kinds, right? Minority groups are of all kinds of things. And so I can sort of relate to that idea of being othered. I think what it does, it helps you maybe to understand all kinds of people in society. It helps you understand other minority groups. It helps you understand, imagine all the refugees that around the world, and they come to other societies and then they don't feel welcome very often. These societies may be harsh towards them because they may not want the refugees, even though the refugees need a home. And you can have more compassion for the world when you understand this kind of othering here. I think sometimes we all get othered a little bit. It is just the nature of things that this can be much worse, of course, if you belong to this kind of minority, LGBTQ minority, but I think everyone sometimes suffers to some degree of othering here. And it is an opportunity for you to have more compassion, I think, when you see that, understanding that this is something everyone has to some degree. You have it more, and other people may have it even more than you have it. And this, I think, is the opportunity that you have in this particular case. And as you have more compassion in this way, I think gradually you may also feel less othered in that society that you are in, whether it's Singapore or whatever it might be, because that compassion somehow starts to transcend the boundaries between people, right? And eventually the time will come when actually that othering may be completely gone. You don't feel it anymore because your heart has kind of opened up to the world, right? And then it doesn't really, you don't feel that problem anymore. And this is the power of metta and compassion. That ultimately you become completely inclusive of everyone around you. And then the barriers are broken down and you don't feel these things anymore. So, yes, so that's good. And thank you for making that point. And I think it is an important point for the rest of everyone also to remember that if you do belong to a minority like the LGBTQ community, remember the suffering that is to belong to that kind of community, right? Because you feel othered, you feel different. You can't really share openly how you feel about things. And that can be very painful and alienating. So this is an opportunity for every one of us to be more inclusive of everyone. We're all human beings. We all have the similar kind of feelings. We have the same aspirations to be happy and overcome suffering. It doesn't matter what your minority you belong to. We have far more in common than what differentiates us. So it's so important to have compassion for each other and have that understanding for each other. All right. Dear Ajahn, how do we prepare ourselves for the India pilgrimage trip? Okay, any sutta to read up before the trip? Maybe it's a little bit too early to think about that. What do you say, Eileen? Maybe we could have maybe this is an idea, Eileen, because I will be coming for the Vesak celebration. Maybe we can have a talk on how to prepare for the Indian pilgrimage. Is that a good idea? So then, because then people will probably already have booked it. We know who is going. So this person may not even get a chance to go. I don't know who this person is. But maybe who knows? So once everyone, then we can have like how to prepare for the India pilgrimage, and then those people who are going can come, and other people can also come. We can have Maybe? Yeah, it's up to you. Just an idea there. So come for the Vesak celebration. I will be coming to Singapore for Vesak again. I'm usually the Vesak monk of Biafra. That is my designation. And then maybe we can talk about this in more detail. All right. Dear Ajahn, sitting for hours on end is not necessary. Some people think that the longer you sit, the wiser you must be. I have seen chickens sit on the nest for days on end. Wisdom comes from being mindful in all postures. Your practice should begin as you awaken in the morning. It should continue until you fall asleep. Don't be concerned about how long you sit. What is important is only that you keep watchful, whether you are working or sitting or going to the bathroom. This is a quote from Ajahn Chah, apparently. The above quote, as well as teaching from 𝐁𝐫𝐚𝐡𝐦𝐴 and from Ajahn Chah, recognized to be an arahant. Yeah, okay. Aggregates tell us that meditation is so important that it should not be done only when we are sitting. And of course, the duration of sitting is not very important. It should be done from the moment when we wake up in the morning before the yeah. I wonder what is Ajahns view. I wonder, do we only sit with our eyes closed during this retreat? If we are able to meditate with our eyes open, we can acquire much more practice time. This is very optimal strategy, especially for lay people. Lastly, please share with us how to meditate with eyes open. Thank you so much. So the idea that you are meditating all the time, yeah, these ideas that you have here with being meditating during the day, it really depends what you mean by that. And this is where we have to be really careful with understanding the path in the right way, the practice in the right way. So one idea of meditation, the reason why this comes about, this idea of meditation in daily life, is because of the way the Satipatthana Sutta is phrased. Yeah? In the Satipatthana Sutta, it talks about mindfulness and awareness. First of all, in the four postures, but also the passage on Sati Sampajanya, which is mindfulness and full awareness. Yeah, which talks about being mindful and fully aware when you are eating and all of these kind of things. And from that comes this idea of always being mindful, yeah, in daily practice. But it is very interesting when you study these sutras in detail, and there are some very interesting studies about this. It seems that those particular parts of the Satipatthana Sutta don't really belong to Satipatthana. Yeah, this is kind of really, really interesting. Yeah. What they belong to is an earlier part of the path. Yeah, so these are not really meditation practices. There are more practices that are done prior to meditation to keep the mind pure. Because just being mindful in daily life, just going around being mindful, doing this, doing that, it is not necessarily all that helpful. The reason you want to be mindful in daily life is to keep a pure mind. Our job is always to reduce the defilements and increase the good qualities, having more metta, more compassion. That is the daily life meditation. You can call that meditation if you like, but I think it's better to call it just virtue, right? Because that is gets more to the point about what it really is. It is about developing good qualities inside. That is what it should really be about. So we need to make this distinction. And then meditation then is when you sit down, you close your eyes and you watch your breath. And you are quite right about this idea. It doesn't really matter. It's not about sitting as long as possible. It is about sitting skillfully and wisely, yeah, understanding the mind in the right way, going through a right process. And one of the things that you often find when you're meditating, that there is like a natural cycle to the meditation. You sit down, you become a bit more peaceful, you may go to a certain depth, you may be watching the breath, and then there comes a point where the mind kind of naturally emerges. So follow the natural cycles of meditation. Yeah, don't just push and push and push and sit for as many hours as possible. That's not really the point. And when you follow the natural cycles, it becomes much easier and much more natural. You come out, come to the end. Okay, you get up, do something else. Go down to the beach. Yeah, have a cup of tea, do some walking meditation, do some reflection, read the next sutta, do something different. Then, when the mind is ready, come back and then do some more meditation practice. So you alternate a bit between the various things. You do different things at different times. So being wise about how you meditate is not about the number of hours. It's about how you go through that cycle, that natural kind of curve of meditation in the right way. Outside of meditation in daily life, it is purity of mind that is important. Yeah, of course, to be able to have a pure mind, you need to have a strong degree of mindfulness, because mindfulness is what tells you whether you are about to lose your temper, whether you are about to have some excessive greed or whatever. And then when you see this is happening, then you can take a countermeasure and go against that defilement of the mind. Yeah, you can remind yourself of compassion, remind yourself that this greed is silly. Why on earth am I greedy about this, etc., etc. And then you can keep the purity of the mind. And as you keep a pure mind during daily life, then when you sit down in the evening and do some meditation or whatever, the meditation is more powerful as a consequence. So this is how I understand the suttas, and this idea of which is called meditation during daily life. I think it's a slightly misleading way of talking about what we really should be doing, which is really keeping a pure mind. That is really what we should be doing. Yeah. So, yeah. Recognized here, 𝐁𝐫𝐚𝐡𝐧 was recognized as an arahant. Yeah, and sometimes the arahants contradict each other. One arahant says this, the other arahant says that. So sometimes you just have to go back to the suttas and kind of ask, what did the Buddha say? Yeah? And you have to take it from there. Yeah? All right. Oh, time is going fast. We still have a few questions, so see what happens. Dear Ajahn, I find it easy to have restraint when I have a wholesome state. Indeed. However, when I have unwholesome state, for anger, ill will, my restraint starts to slide. I try to be mindful and know the action may bring harm, but I feel I want to do it for that little spurt of satisfaction. How do I practice when in an unwholesome state? So what you have to ideally do is to overcome the anger, right? And often it is not enough just to be mindful to overcome the anger. You have to look at the situation in a different way, give rise to metta and compassion, and that is how you overcome the anger. And you have to learn that little satisfaction you get from being angry is very counterproductive and very negative and very bad, and it's going to let you down in the long run. So don't allow that to happen. Remember, don't act when you're angry. Don't allow the anger to drive the action. Try to change your mind stance. Look at the situation in a new way. And it's not that hard to do. Tomorrow or the day after, I'm going to talk about this in more detail, because this is such an important part of the practice. I'm going to talk the sutta that I teach in every single retreat, which is the Overcoming of Resentment Sutta. And those of you who have been on my retreats before, you will know this sutta backwards and forwards, and you're going to hear it one more time. Because it's nice to hear one more time. Yeah, I reckon it's always nice to hear these fundamental suttas. So stay tuned, and then you will know how to deal with this in the following days. Dear Ajahn, could you please explain that deeds are my womb, my relative, and my refuge from today's sutta? So They are your refuge in the sense that if you live well, you will gain the good results and you will be able to take refuge in those good results in the future. Yeah, you will have the happiness that comes from that. And if you do bad things, then you will have a bad refuge in the future. You will have to deal with those things one way or another because they will be in your life. Yeah, so either the refuge or they will be your anti-refuge, the kind of the negative thing. They are your relative because they always come with you. Relatives are always around. Your karma is always there in your mind. Yeah, either tormenting you or giving you happiness, depending on what kind of karma you have done in the past. They're like your relatives, yeah, they are around. If you have bad relatives, it's bad. If you have good relatives, it's good. Yeah, it's hard to get away from your relatives because they are your relatives, so they have to be around. Yeah, karma is the same. The womb is because you are born from the womb, you are born from your karma. The karma decides where you get reborn. So in that sense, they are the womb. Yeah, make sense? All right, next one. Okay, please recommend some Buddhist novels. Sometimes suttas get dull. Buddhist novels. All right, so the best novels, maybe the Jataka tales. They're like Buddhist novels. You know the Jataka tales or the Dhammapada stories? These are like Buddhist novels. So these are said to be the stories of the Buddha's past lives. That's called Jatakas, means birth stories. And they are like stories, yeah? And they're kind of cool. And sometimes they have a nice Buddhist message. And sometimes they're not Buddhist at all. And you get really confused. You wonder, what has this got to do with Buddhism? This is the downside of these Buddhist stories. Sometimes they're not Buddhist. The Buddhist story that is not Buddhist, I'm not sure how that works. But anyway, yeah. And then you have the Dhammapada verses. Yeah, you all know the Dhammapada. Dhammapada is a beautiful, beautiful little book of verse. And just reading the verses themselves are great. Sometimes that's where you have the beautiful verses like hatred never ceases through hatred in this world. Hatred only ceases through love. This is an eternal law. Yeah, beautiful little verses like that, one after the other. Yeah. And these verses have background stories, and the background stories are enormous. There's whole books called the Dhammapada translation. You can read these background stories. They are also like Buddhist novels, if you like. Yeah, so read that. That will give you some more fun to read. Are there other Buddhist novels around? I think there are. I think Bhakti Sujato once. Is he still working on that novel, or did he publish it? He was going to publish a Buddhist novel. I never trust Bhakti Sujato. He does weird things. I never know where I have him. He's too kind of his brain is too large, and he does kind of strange stuff. And I don't know what is going on with him. But there are certain Buddhist novels out there. But the suttas are dull because you're not used to them. Yeah, and so come on some of these sutta retreats because as we go through the suttas, you will actually start to realize how interesting they can be, especially some of the similes and these kind of things, and then you will kind of have a bit of fun. So yeah, that's what I would recommend if you find them dull. There's also on the internet, there's lots of kind of nice sutta expositions on the internet. Yeah, expositions of like the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the greatest sutta on the Buddha's passing away. And that is one sutta. It's really long, and I went through the whole sutta, I think 20 or 25 sessions or something like that. So you've got lots of it's really interesting sutta, and you can listen to that if you are interested. That's a nice way of getting into suttas. Otherwise, go online, search on Buddhist novels and see what happens. All right. Dear Ajahn, just like the Buddha had knowledge about rebirth and yet still proved himself of the truth, how about the presence of Nibbana? Since there is no rebirth, how can one improve that the state of such exists? Tusen takk. 1,000 thanks. So that is Norwegian. That means 1,000 thanks. This is so that's good. You haven't spelled it exactly right, but you have done a very valiant effort to get it right. So well done. Does Nibbana exist? This is a good question, right? And it is something that you cannot really know. But what you can know is you can know that the mind leans in that direction. Nibbana means extinguishment. And extinguishment means the ending of the defilements of the mind. It means the lessening of all the problems that we have. It means less thinking, less issues, less of everything. And you can see that happening in your meditation practice, yeah? So that's like small Nibbana happening right there. And if there is small Nibbana, maybe there is big Nibbana, right? This is how you start to understand. You kind of extrapolate from your existing experiences, and you start to think maybe big Nibbana exists if small Nibbana exists. And so you see the small Nibbanas in your practice, eventually they lead to things like the jhanas. The jhanas are actually called pariyaya Nibbana, Nibbana with a further course to go. Yeah, so the jhanas are already called Nibbana, kind of partial Nibbana or temporary or preliminary Nibbana in the suttas. And then the final Nibbana goes beyond that. Yeah, so you start to see Nibbana happening. Things are disappearing. Things are getting extinguished. How does it feel when things are getting extinguished? It feels wonderful, right? It feels beautiful when the body disappears. It feels great when the senses are gone. It feels absolutely marvelous when the will is completely subdued. This is how you start to understand why Nibbana must be such a wonderful and amazing thing. When everything is subdued, everything is extinguished. So go with your experiences, yeah? And then you get some idea why the Buddha's Nibbana may actually exist. So, 5 minutes past 9. Okay, I'm gonna stop soon, and I think we have made some progress because I think there are less questions left today than there was yesterday. So so please don't stop asking questions. I promise I will go through all the questions before the end of the retreat. It's never happened yet that any questions were left over, and it will not happen on this retreat either. So let me do one more because it is already 9 past. Dear Ajahn, when I meditate, I feel very calm and peaceful. Good. And after a while, very few thoughts come in. Excellent. At first, it feels nice to have this peacefulness, but after a while, it gets boring. The mind says, is this it? It's not restlessness, because I still feel peaceful. I still feel peaceful, but I don't feel joy. Any advice? Thank you, Ajahn. Yes, that is exactly, you have kind of hitting the thing on the head there. And this is the idea, you want the joy to arise, because that joy is the glue of the meditation that makes it very, very interesting. And that is where you don't feel bored anymore, right? So you want to try to give rise to that joy. And the way the Buddha talks about this, and this is, I already mentioned these things already, but I guess I can mention them again. It is a standard ways of giving rise to joy. Yeah, and one of the ways I was talking about before is to rejoice in your Kalyana Mittas. Yeah, wow, how fortunate I am. How very fortunate I am to have spiritual friends such as these. If you can think that, guaranteed, if you really can think that and mean that, almost guaranteed joy will arise because you really feel grateful, you feel lucky that you have these wonderful spiritual companions. So try to get into that idea of having these marvelous spiritual companions in your life. That includes maybe some of your teachers like Ajahn Brahm. Wow, I got Ajahn Brahm as my teacher. Isn't that great? I got the Buddha as my teacher. I have whoever it is as my teacher. I have these spiritual friends. Wow, this is just wonderful. Again, the Buddha talks about the 𝐁𝐫𝐚𝐡𝐧 and the 𝐒𝐮𝐭𝐭𝐚. Appreciate yourself for being a good person. Yeah, understand that actually it is really remarkable that someone undertakes things like the precepts, tries to live with kindness. Yeah, what a wonderful thing that is in the world, that people are like this. I am like this. Wow, what a wonderful thing that is. I'm giving other people freedom from fear. I'm giving other people a sense that they can trust the world around them, they can trust me. I'm giving a gift to the world by living a moral life. What a wonderful thing that is. Yeah, so get into this idea. Have a sense of gratitude. Yeah, have a sense of all of these things that kind of bring up positive emotions inside of you. So when you become peaceful, just nudge the mind a little bit in that direction and then see if you can get the joy to arise as a consequence. Yeah, and then when the joy starts to come, it becomes very, very interesting from that. Use a bit of metta at that point. Have a bit of compassion. Yeah, think, wow, by doing this, yeah, I'm able to help people in the world more. The world needs more compassion. Bring up a bit of metta, yeah, of kindness for all the people around you. All of these things are little kind of sparks that can spark the sense of joy in meditation practice. You have to experiment a bit, and eventually, hopefully, it will arise. Okay, everyone, that is all for tonight. So I wish you all a very good night. Have a good night's rest, and we will see you back again tomorrow morning. So let us pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha before we call it a night.